Good morning, everyone. I think it's just about 10 o'clock, so I'm going to get started. We might be maybe a couple seconds before the top of the hour, but I will start us out a little bit slowly and give folks time to log on and just start off by talking a little bit about the Traveling Archivist Program and the partners that we have in putting this program together this morning. The Traveling Archivist Program is a free on-site consultation service that the State Archives runs, but we couldn't do it without a lot of help from partners. And one of those is the National Historical Publications and Records Commission, which is a branch of the National Archives. And that provides funding for our travel and for some of the supplies that we're able to give to recipients. And if you haven't checked out their website, I'll put that in the chat in a few minutes. That is a great thing to explore for grants. And I know some of you are always on the lookout for grants, but if you do have an archival collection, whether it's audiovisual or document collection, it's a great resource to find grant funds. They offer funds for things like audience engagement and accessibility and collaborations with other small archives. So all of those are grant sources that you should take a look at and consider for your archival collections. And the Federation of North Carolina Historical Societies is another program that our Department of Natural and Cultural Resources runs. It is a network of small historical organizations across the state. And we offer services like regular communications, quarterly newsletters, mini grants, a revolving fund for no interest loans for publications. So the three small museums that we're profiling today are members directly or indirectly of the Federation, and some of regional associations or local associations like the Mecklenburg Historical Association are members. And so that's wonderful. We have over 100 members across the state. So we're excited to showcase some of our members' work and excited to talk more about what the Traveling Archivist Program can provide. The other really important partners that the Traveling Archivist Program relies on through the state archives is other organizations and expert archivists throughout the state. And so in this round, the focus has really been connecting collections with the Digital Heritage Center, which is based in UNC Chapel Hill, and they have 300 partner organizations now that have contributed materials. One of our recipients we'll highlight today is the 300th partner, so they may already have more than that. It's been about a month since they reached that milestone. And they're an amazing resource for all archival collections. They work not only with cultural heritage institutions, but community organizations, which is also something that the Traveling Archivist Program is reaching out to more and more. We had one community organization in this year's cohort that we worked with. So that's a new direction for us, and we're happy to work more in that direction. We will, this round is kind of wrapping up, and this is a showcase today to talk about the work that's been done over the past year. We are going to have applications open any day now for the next cohort for the 2022 work cycle. And for that work cycle, we'll focus more on general needs, again, on-site consultations with a combination of virtual, because we're all doing more and more virtual work now all the time. And the circumstances over the past year forced us into that more hybrid consultation, but it had some advantages. So I think we're going to kind of pursue that, and depending on the needs of the recipients, and we should have travel funds to make that available to about 5 organizations each year. And we do that in conjunction with expert archivists. As I mentioned, this past year, we've worked with Erin Larimore at UNCG. She's the university archivist there, who's been our expert on arrangement and description and helping folks get their records organized. And we'll be working with other expert archivists who are partners on our State Historical Records Advisory Board, in our Friends of the Archives leadership, and other tight connections we have with that expertise across the state to help us make those in-person visits and expert recommendations. I'm not a trained archivist, so I rely on those partners quite a bit, and we certainly have many of them in our own staff, but working closely with those collaborators has been great. So we do have the application ready, and those of you who are tuning in today can get a head start on it. Unfortunately, it's not posted on our webpage yet, but I'll put my colleague Brooke Chuka's contact information in the chat. If you'd like to get a head start, you can email her and she will send you the 2022 application. It'll be due at the end of the month. And we hope it's short enough that it won't be super burdensome to complete. So with that, I'm hoping people have had a chance to log on, and I'm going to turn it over to Barbara and get going on some other images to showcase the work that she has done at Matthews Heritage Museum.
Thank you, Adrian. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you great.
Okay. Thanks so much for setting this program up. Just about a year ago, I was information about this came across my desk, and I was very interested in it because we had, by chance and great luck, come across documents specifically relating to this building, which you see on your screen. It's the Massey Clark House, and it was built in 1879. The first occupant was Dr. Massey. In 2002, his descendant, Elizabeth Furness, sent to our town 20 documents that were receipts, primarily receipts, and just thought that it should come back to the town. At that point, there was no thought of this building ever becoming a museum. So a decade passed, and in fact, this small building was opened as a museum in 2013. And as a beginning to process the collections, Paula Lester, who was head of the foundation, our parent organization, she brought to me these 20 receipts. And as we want to do, we tried to send Elizabeth a contract of gift. Well, it came back. Unfortunately, she had passed away. And thankfully for the internet, I was able to locate her son and corresponded with him, requesting that he sign off on our contribution of documents, which he did. We corresponded, and he said, my father has since passed, and we believe that we will have a lot more documents for you. In about a year's time, they came to this area with over 700 documents. One of the exciting things that you see on your screen was a photograph of Dr. Massey, because we didn't know what he looked like. And we got 12 photographs of the family, 100 plus pages of letters and more. And as I mentioned, many receipts that are interesting once you know the background history. We began to, with my volunteer corps, if they weren't doing tours, those who were interested were helping me transcribe the letters. And there were about 70 of them. We typed them up. We filed all the papers, receipts, letters, everything according to years. And then I started to do genealogy on the Massey family, primarily to be able to give better tours of this property, but to come to know who wrote the letters, who was mentioned. We then put it into the book chronologically, trying to ID people. As I said, just reading the letters in order helps to make sense of what was going on in their daily lives. But of course, as I read letters, there were people I had no idea who they were. One gentleman, Aristocothan, kept coming up, and he signed most of his letters to "Dear Sister," despite what woman he was writing to. And it turned out he married one of Dr. Massey's daughters. What the letters revealed to us is changed our view of our own history. Your understanding of history is sometimes limited to what is passed down from generation to generation. However, in this case, by introducing primary source materials, we could verify and disprove in cases facts, quote unquote, that we had known. In particular, we found out that the age of the house we had always assumed was 1880, but in fact, it was finished in 1879, and we have a couple of letters from one of Dr. Massey's son, who was overlooking the project, to Dr. Massey, and it literally described what how the house was built. And it said there were, excuse me, 2 rooms with a fireplace in the middle and an L across the back. So the reason we always assumed it was constructed in 1880 was because that was the transference of deed on the books. However, as you see here, Dr. Massey was here by April of 1879 and was making a down payment to E.J. Funderburk, who built the house. So does a year matter? I don't know, but we now know the truth and we try and tell it. We also there was a lot of letters going back and forth between E.J. Funderburk and Dr. Massey, and it was curious, how did they know each other? Why is E.J. being so generous to give Massey a house for a year free of charge, basically? And we later found out that through genealogy that there was a marriage of a sister to a child. So E.J.'s sister married one of Dr. Massey's children. So of course there was a much greater tie-in. On the bottom right, we also have documentation of of Dr. Massey, who had been living in Florida. He is sending his mattress by railroad on March 25th, 79. So shortly after the arrival of his mattress, I believe he was moving into his house. So we know for sure March of 79, or certainly by April, the family was beginning to reside in the house. We also came to learn that Dr. Massey and Mr. Funderburk were partners in business. Funderburk ran a store here, and a year or so after Dr. Massey got here, we find a page or two showing his partnership with E.J. Funderburk and a gentleman named Covington. And then we have pages that show what Massey was selling. They kept the inventory separate because Dr. Massey was selling medicines for the people, whereas Mr. Funderburk was selling anything from dress material to nails and what have you. So we begin to see that relationships between them. The documents also flesh out details such as Dr. Massey. We learned he was a Baptist. He was a very good Baptist. He collected the dues from his fellow church members. Apparently, he believed in temperance. as we have documentation from the Temperance Party. So we begin to get a sense of who this gentleman is. The one thing I want to say is that the more I became familiar with the papers, the more I learned and the more I got out of them. Sometimes when you are just seeing things for the first time, there's no aha moment. Now, the envelope that you see here from Matthews High School, that documented something completely unknown to us, and that was there was an earlier school here considered quite good. So again, without the knowledge of or without knowing there was no high school here, looking at an envelope is mundane, but suddenly you realize, my goodness, there was another school here. And in fact, we have receipts where Dr. Massey sent his children for payment to the school. And we were able to verify the existence of the school through city directories of Charlotte. So, you know, those aha moments suddenly become very more knowledge. And excuse me, times when you don't know enough to understand what you're seeing. You know, I could read Aristocoffin and not have a clue who he was, but once I could put the part of the puzzle together that he had married Sally Massey, then it all made sense. And obviously he was taking care of Dr. Massey's business in South Carolina. As for the future, I'd like to go through the letters again and pick out stories of interest. There definitely are a number. One includes a son-in-law who, with his brother, encountered a drunk on the street. This was in Florida, and the son-in-law of Dr. Massey encouraged his brother to shoot the man. He shot him once, and the brother-in-law, or his brother, suggested shoot him again, which killed this drunk. And we learn from Dr. Massey's daughter, this man's wife, that they fled, and they fled as far away to Crawford, Texas. And she told her father unequivocally she was going to follow him. And in fact, they ended up escaping from the law and never did catch him and never served time. So so those are some of the fun things you learn by absolutely being able to research primary source materials. Again, I'd like to say that a year ago, I thought, oh, this would be great to get these papers digitized. And in fact, that's exactly what we've done. They're now online, and I'm thankful to this project to help us be able to share these papers with the rest of the community.
And Barbara, I thought I'd include a couple of slides of your contributor analytics page, because that's one of the great things about connecting with Digital NC and having your materials there, is that you can kind of track the usage of them and show over time what some of the most popular resources are. And that can also help you begin to promote the resources availability now. For instance, we know that Dr. Massey was a physician, and there are some other collections with physicians. So maybe there's a group that does studies of that, and that's something you could let them know about.
Sure.
So those sorts of ideas. This is just, and obviously your materials have just been up very briefly and got up, I think, in October, and I have another image of that whole spread, but you can see some of the peaks of use of people logging in. And the other great thing about the analytics, let's see, in the next slide, is you can see which materials are getting the most hits. So, and it may not be what you expected, but it looks like that genealogy, that document of genealogy has gotten the most hits since these went live in October. So that's the kind of thing that website is great at. And let's see, I noticed we have one question that I'd like you to answer before we move on to Matthew. And I should, and this reminds me, I should have let everyone know, go ahead and use the chat or the Q&A for your questions. And we hope to have a Q&A period at the end to just get the whole panel on board for Q&A. But this one's very specific to Barbara, so we'll go ahead and bring it up. What was the significance of Dr. Massey in the community?
That's a great question. He was obviously one of the early leaders. The fact that he was a physician could, we were very blessed as a community because he was not the only doctor here. And he was beginning to age out when he got here. So I don't think he practiced medicine for a great length of time, but being the father of 9 children, you know, he was a man of prominence for sure. And he was a leader in the Baptist church and all of that. But more importantly, he started his life as a farmer and as a wagon maker when he moved to Florida from Lancaster, Virginia, South Carolina. He became a physician, and we have no idea how he did that. So maybe coordinating with a few other medical practitioners out there, doctors, we'll find out how he became educated. I think he followed other people. So, but he is definitely a physician by the time he gets here.
Okay, so now we're going to have Matthew Titchiner, who's the director of the Museum and Archives of Rockingham County, tell us about his project. Thanks, Barbara.
Thank you, Adrian.
Hey, Matthew, you're muted.
There we go. Yeah. Oh, we'll get there in the end. Okay, bear with me. Let me just reduce that. Okay. So yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I'll be talking about reorganizing and reapproaching our archives at the Museum and Archives of Rockingham County, of which I'm the executive director there. And yeah, we're not quite in the same position. We are a little bit earlier, let's say, on the first steps of this journey. So I will go through a little bit about us for anyone not familiar with the museum. So we're an independent nonprofit in Wentworth, North Carolina, and we opened as a museum in 2012 at the site of the old 1907 courthouse, which is this large building, which is a very large building. We don't use all of it. We use about 60% of the building. It's roughly about not far off 50,000 square feet. So it's a big bit of building. But it's served as a fantastic museum and archives, plenty of exhibition space, and what were the original deed of record vaults are actually now our archive vaults, which is pretty perfect. But this has been the site of the courthouse since 1787. It had been remodeled and burnt down at least once. And it actually was the kind of the brainchild of the Rockingham County Historical Society, and they have been operating since the 1950s. And really, throughout all of that time, they had gathered a huge quantity of material of local histories, but they didn't really have anywhere to put it. Now, they actually purchased this building, which is just opposite the museum, in 1967, and spent a couple of years renovating it to what it was originally. And They did use some of it for storage, but it's not a huge building, and the basement isn't exactly suitable for archive storage. And so a lot of the histories really were in members' houses, basements, attics, you name it. So there was a real need in the county for a historical repository, and it came out of a lot of local community support, did the museum. And so they were working towards that concept for a couple of years until we opened in 2012. This building is a wooden tavern from 1816 called the Wright Tavern. It's a restored wooden dog run building. It's actually one of the last of this kind of elaborate nature dog run buildings in the state. And next door to it is the old 1905 post office, which this is kind of a part of the inside when you walk in the door. And we also have a Revolutionary War site, which is High Rockford Park. It's a small, very small walking trail, but it does have access to the river. So for any kayakers or canoers. Pre-pandemic, we were open usually 3 days a week, but at the moment it's kind of by appointment only. We offer tours, archival and research services, and host permanent exhibitions in the museum. But we are a small team, made smaller, unfortunately, by the pandemic, one staff member retiring. So right now, staff-wise, it is just myself. We're hoping to change that over the next few months. And it has a huge impact on the way we've kind of connected with the community, doing a lot more virtual events, as we never had that before. And being able to, I guess, kind of reflect as an organization. It has been a positive of the pandemic that we were able to get around to some of those back of house tasks and some of those kind of overarching strategies that really, when you kind of bog down in the day-to-day stuff, you never get a chance. So it really has kind of helped us in a way, as well as causing many challenges. But that's a little bit about us. Now, best way is to be honest. And I think every museum has at least one room which is kind of shut away from the public and not really ready for them to see some of the archive items. But when I started in November of 2019, just in time for the pandemic, this was kind of the archive, the greasy meat. Certainly not the worst I've ever been in, but it needed a bit of attention and care. And I think really what had happened was that when the museum opened, not only did they get all of that history that the society had been collecting for 50 odd years, or 60 odd years, they actually just were inundated with people turning up with truckloads of history, literally. And there were some fantastic gems in there, but there are also things that aren't. And so at the moment, when I first came in, it was quite overwhelming. Okay, we need to figure out, first of all, what we have, where it is, the most basic kind of tasks, and hopefully kind of be a bit more selective in the process of what we actually keep and what's relevant to our museum. Now, in January, it was 2020, such a long time ago, we started the Legacy Archival project, which was basically a staged plan on how we were going to tackle this. Because even though these pictures and our space is actually quite vast, these are just a couple of rooms. So this is our intake room when I started. These two are part of our general artifact room, though it is bigger than these pictures suggest. And this is just a small, what was mainly textiles. There were two other rooms that were larger than this one. And then that's just one of our vaults. We have another paper vault downstairs, which is almost the same size. So we weren't short of space. But certainly one thing that we were short of was usable shelves, and we had no supplies. And we don't have a huge budget, being a small museum in a rural area, small team. So trying to find funding was definitely high on the priority list. Now, we had some of our items. There were 69 items that were actually digitized with digital NC pretty early on in the MARC's history. I actually didn't look at what date that was, but it was in the first few years, I think, of us being open. And the long-term vision is that we do get to the digitization stage and can really preserve some of those histories that are at risk of being lost. And we do have a lot of history that spans over a great deal of time from the 17th century through to the 20th, but and a lot of that is paper and photographs. So there are a lot of candidates for digitization, but we're not quite there yet to do all of our collections, certainly, but we will get there. So I'd be interested as well. I don't know if anyone else who's working in museums might have come across this, but during the pandemic, certainly for us, we received an inordinate amount of donations of items, and I'm certainly not complaining, but it was quite overwhelming. And these were relevant donations. So a lot of these books that you see here are actually bound copies of local newspapers, most of which have already been digitized, but some may not have. So we're going to sift through those, and they run right through. We've got ones I think as early as the 1930s, with a couple of really old ones, odd ones, and some more books as well. These were actually negatives from a donor. It was kind of his local photographer's life work. Most of them tend to be people's weddings, which wouldn't be normally something we would take, but he used to sell them actually as a bit of an income source, and so he gave them with the express permission that we could sell those as a bit of a money maker. Now I don't think they're going to fly off the shelves, but we have had a few sales already of people that want their wedding negatives that maybe have lost their photographs or just want them. And there are a few businesses in there which we're still going through. And in addition to all of that, if that wasn't enough in terms of collections, we actually have a lot that was left from the county itself when they vacated the courthouse and moved about a mile down the road into their new building. And so these are their old map books. We have a lot of blueprints, and these are rolled up maps as well, and they stretch right around there. Now, one donation we had, which was really welcome, were these metal cabinets as well from down in Greensboro. And so we're still in the rearranging phase, but I think we'll have enough storage, certainly. And so at the time of us applying to the Traveling Archivist Program, we had received 2 grants, amazing grants, one from the Regional Area Foundation and one from the Cannon Foundation. And one thing we lacked, I guess, was the expertise. Being a small team, archives has not been my primary profession within museums, and so we definitely needed some of that kind of guidance, and even down to just supply purchases for kind of what we wanted to do or what we wanted to tackle first. What might be the best options, the cost-effective options to make those grants go further. So as one thing as well we had to tackle was, yes, we have a lot of storage, but a lot of that storage is not archival storage. A lot of it is actually medical shelving. I'm not 100% sure how we ended up getting all of that, but I know that some came from doctors' offices and medical facilities, which is great, but it needed a little bit of kind of DIY arts and crafts to make those suitable for some of the publications and things that we wanted to store. But as you can see, we are making progress despite the pandemic and some of those challenges. Starting to clear some of this area with the grants. We were able to get some new equipment, a small scanner, some computers, because pretty much all of our computers were dead by that point. So we were in need of equipment desperately. Even just kind of sealing off some of those textiles in the short term until we get around to actually looking at those properly. New shelves and supplies, which are fantastic, and the Traveling Archivist Program helped bring a few more supplies to us as well. And that was done with a very, very small volunteer team, just 3 regular volunteers for most of that, to be honest. So, we're very proud of what we were able to do with that. And let me just go to the next slide, because I think it's on there. Yeah, so I did put an image in. And so during the actual visit, we had several visits from Traveling Archivist Program and the experts involved. We looked really at our paper archive. That was really our concern. It's around 75% of our collection is paper, photographs, negatives, which, like I said, span from the 17th through to the 20th centuries. the program actually helped us identify some of our collections as maybe digitization priorities when we get around to it. The picture, one on the top right there, this one here is a 1794 land deed purchased by former North Carolina Governor Alexander Martin, which is pretty cool and very relevant to a lot of the local history and national history too. And it helped us kind of rediscover what we had. You know, some of these collections we just hadn't had the staffing power or volunteer power to get through all of it. Another collection as well that the program helped us identify, which we didn't actually think of at first, apart from the local newspaper, was the old journals that the society actually used to create. So they used to do at least one a year, if not two or three. And they ran right from 1976 through to, I think it was 2010 was the last one that they did. And it amalgamated a huge amount of local history, births, marriages, building history, genealogies, Civil War. It kind of covered a lot. And it's really our bread and butter. If anyone asks any kind of questions related to Rockingham County, we tend to go to them first. But those have never been digitized. I don't think a lot of people realize we have them either. And so, yeah, having those as a priority for digitization when we get to it, I think will help a lot of researchers and us as well try and figure out what we have and some of those stories. Now, the program, as well as working with experts, you know, helping is going to be helping MARC staff actually in a few days about best digitization kind of practice and looking at our specific equipment that we have and coming and visiting, and that's going to be invaluable to us. So yeah, definitely worth it, even just for the expertise. It was really fantastic. And through the process as well, we hope that it will eventually lead to greater public access, and that's the ultimate goal from this. And so we've really kind of taken everything that the program's given us, everything that we are working on, and the policies and procedures, and trying to embed it more into the museum strategy. Because I think, as the kind of first image showed, it was kind of separate. It unfortunately been left behind a little bit at the archives. And so, you know, we're looking at our past perfect collections management software and potentially upgrading that to the web online edition and thinking long term, basically. And the program's really helped us kind of broaden our horizons. And also another positive from this is that the project, as we have continued to kind of shout about the project and being part of the Traveling Archivist Program on social media. Facebook tends to be our main social media platform, and it's actually encouraged people specifically to give because they know we're here, they know what we're doing, and they can see the work that we're doing and where we're going, and they've been more encouraged to give items to us. And so I just put a couple in here. These are Reedsville city directories. Not particularly old, they run from the 60s through to the 80s actually, but they do include a lot of businesses that aren't there anymore. And they are a useful resource for people that are researching local history in areas. And then this was a rather unusual donation, and it was a series of magic lantern slides documenting 19th century political satire, politician portraits, Civil War images in there as well. And this slide is actually from the Spanish-American War. So interesting. It's kind of generated more public engagement with our archive, which is great. And that's pretty much it. So I will stop sharing my screen, but I just want to say thank you to Adrian and to the program again.
Oh, it's been great to see everything you're doing over there, Matthew. It's amazing. And I wondered if you could just say a few words about what archival collections you are prioritizing. I know you're still kind of in the sorting it out phase, and Lisa Gregory's going to be visiting from the Digital Heritage Center, so you'll make those decisions maybe next week. But what are you thinking at this point?
Yeah, so when we've had previous visits, that photograph actually was just on one long bench. It was one session, but it was completely mixed in terms of what the actual material was. The deed was part of that, and I think it represents quite a nice finite little project in a way, to digitize. Again, I think one of the priorities might be the journals and maybe a few of those newspapers that haven't been digitized. There's still questions around some of those because there are large chunks missing in local newspapers. The Readsville Review, for instance, you can't find any from the 60s. Some were thrown, unfortunately, lost, and there is some say that there were a fire as well, and that burnt a few. So there are big swathes of those local histories that aren't there. But if we can digitize any that haven't been already, I think that would be great. And throughout this, we've been preparing spaces to store these things properly. I think that's half a battle, putting it in proper storage, putting it on a shelf, and actually putting it in its proper place and getting it onto the system. I think it's, like I say, we're right at the beginning of this journey. It's almost like square one for us. So yeah, it's exciting. And we always need volunteers. I think I would be remiss if I didn't plug the whole volunteer thing. We're always in need. So if anyone would like to be interested, I'll put my email in this chat box.
Student interns welcome. I know we have some attendees from UNCG library program. They may be staff, but they could maybe connect to students.
Absolutely.
Aaron helps with that too. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's rare you get to start from the beginning, I think, with a museum like fresh. But yeah, it's exciting. So yeah, I'll put my email in there.
Yes, that was one thing I meant to say to you is we had a request for your contact information. So definitely type that in to the chat or Q&A. And,
email's usually best, I will say, just because right now I'm the only staff member, so by appointment, and I'm looking after two very small girls that we just had recently. So it's a bit hectic at the moment. So email is the best.
Yeah. And back to your point, just getting the staff, even though it's just you right now, intellectual control over the collection is certainly the first step to providing widespread access. Because if you don't know what you have or where it is, then you can't connect people with it. So
no, and we couldn't tease those stories out of our archive for online content. Exhibitions, we were relying on a couple of people who have been at the museum for a while, volunteers. I'm like, do you know where this collection? Oh, well, I think it's down in this, and so we were trying to get away from that and trying to organize it, but it'll help us program a lot better. And through the process, I didn't put it in there, but we actually managed to amalgamate a lot of Civil War collections. One thing in particular was a broken Civil War statue that we have for a while, and we actually managed to source through kind of advertising our archive work. We managed to source the original speech that was given at the inauguration and a couple of drafts, and then the letter to the makers as to why they were making it, and a postcard from the time, which was actually a photograph of the inauguration in 1910. So it kind of is slowly pulling together exhibition ideas along with it too. So
yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm hoping that we have some folks here from Eastern Cabarrus. I know we have some in the participant list, and I'm inviting them to talk. I can't, since this is a webinar setup, I think maybe there was some technical difficulty with Ben Callahan, who's our main contact there for today, joining us as a panelist, but maybe this talking function will let you all comment.
Can you hear us?
There you are. Yes, I can. That's great.
That's Marcia. She's on, we're at a different computer, so we might need to move our computer to her computer.
Okay, well, I also invited, there are two Marcia Morrises on the participant list, and both of you now have talking privileges. So maybe that'll work for both of you.
Okay, I was going to try to get where you could get, I don't know why we're not able to see us. But I don't know why we can't. I guess we pushed the wrong button someplace to be able to get online.
And I can also let Nick speak too, if that would help.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
that would be great.
Nick, yes.
Okay. All right. So we've got a good crew now from Eastern Cabarrus. So if you all just maybe want to start out talking a little bit about your museum, and then we'll move into the promotions. And well, I guess the next thing after just introducing your museum is to talk a little bit about what's on Digital NC now from you, because that's a big milestone.
Okay. My name's Ben Callahan. I'm going to let Nick, are you there?
I am.
Nick, you're the one who really is in charge of this stuff, and I really want you to basically give information about what we're doing and what y'all are doing and what we're all doing here and how y'all got into the digital thing and everything.
Okay.
You mind?
Do you want to do the introduction to the museum?
Yeah, I can do that if you want me to.
Okay.
The Eastern Commerce Historical Society Museum actually is 40 years old. We've been in existence since 1980. You have a not a photograph, a lithograph of the college. We are located in two buildings in the town of Mount Pleasant. The buildings being two buildings of several that were part of a college that was built in the 1850s of the Lutheran. It was the first Lutheran college in North Carolina, which later moved to Lenore Rhine. The buildings that we use, the main building is the one you see on the front. That's the main building. That is our museum. The building to the left is our what we call Society Hall. The building to the right burned. So we have the two buildings left, again using the lithograph. And the society was organized as a museum to house local artifacts, local paper, local documents and things that individuals from the town and from the community would bring to the museum, and they would be set up to display. Over the years, it has evolved. We've done everything. It was interesting because both of the two participants before, we've gone through all that, and we're still going through a lot of the stuff that you're doing. We're getting in new documents. We still get new documents all the time. The volunteer issues, all of those are things that we've experienced. Again, being 40 years, our staffing and volunteer work and everything has changed dramatically over the years. We get different people every 5 or 6 years. And so we do some things that are, we over and over again. But the most interesting thing, I think, and Nick can talk about this, is even though we've had all this stuff all these years, we always used to do a decent inventory of the items that we had here. But the one thing that we lacked was an inventory of the documents and the books. And we have a huge library here. And with North Carolina Digital, we have NC Digital, we have Digital NC. We have just begun the digital process. And I think that she mentioned that we were the 300th partner. We basically have the yearbooks from the top 4 yearbooks from the college that was here, and we sent those off, and they were digitized. Currently, and Nick is in charge of this. We are digitizing. We are cataloging for digitization all the photographs that we've got here, which probably number several hundred, and we have to go through each one of those photographs, and the process of that is very intense, and to get them to send up so they can be digitized. We've done over the years. We've done projects. We've done seminars. We've done presentations. Like I said, we've done a lot about everything in terms of getting out to the public and information. I know one of the things, Adrian, you talked about was just recently the town of Mount Pleasant wanted to do something with some stuff, and they created a mural. They wanted to create a mural on the side of one of the buildings. And of course, the big historical photographs, we provided the photograph for them to use for the mural. And you'll see on the right hand side here, that is the photograph that we used. And we gave the photograph to reproduce the photograph, and a local artist. There you see the mural, which is on the side of the building here in Mount Pleasant. You see the building on the right. If you can imagine, transfer that mural over to that building, and that's the mural as you enter town from what we call from the Concord side, going east to west, west to east. On the Highway 73, that's the first thing you see in town. And there are plans to do more of that, a couple of more sites. And once we got that with that, and some of the merchants saw it, they've actually wanted to do some more murals. So, and again, our role in that is providing of course, the photographs and also information about that mural. One of the things that was interesting about this mural, and Nick can talk about this too, was identifying the people in that mural. We had some information, but not much. And basically going through some of the stuff that had been here for years, we came across a copy of this photograph that actually told us who these people were. And we, again, going back and researching who these people were. That was part of it. And of course, the town post posted it on their website also.
And you can actually date the photo
And
from
this, this
side.
and being able to, again, just an example here, just this is one photograph. And this is what we try to do with all our stuff is when was the photograph made, or can you give an idea when this photograph was made? Again, talking about the people in here. As a researcher, I was able to give some information about the different people involved in this picture. One of the interesting people in this picture is the young man, the very young man in the back in the middle. Nobody, and we could identify some of the people in the front, but nobody, and we came across a photograph of information on the back of the photograph that told us who that person was, and I was able to give some information about him. The actual owner of the building is the man on the right behind. You can see exactly behind the window because that's how it's mounted, but he is standing on the right. He was the owner of the building, and the building still stands. And you'll notice it was a gas station at one time. Now it's been multiple used over time. But things like that are what we're interested in doing, and making those photographs available. When I got involved with this, Nick and Richard, who was with me, they were already there. Bill Electric, who was a former president of the society. They got involved in inventorying all the library. Believe it or not, over 40 years, the library and the photographs had never been inventoried. And one of the things that we did, I came in late, a little bit on top of it, was basically inventorying all this, putting on a spreadsheet. Terry McManaway, who was in charge of the program when we first started, he was left now, moved away. He was really the person behind all of this, who got all this stuff. He created spreadsheets, computer spreadsheets, so we could put all that online. So when somebody comes in, not online, on our computer database, so people could come in if they want to look up a certain document, and certainly we did a creative index. We could pull that document that we had scanned ourselves and put in here, and we could also find the books where they were. That wasn't done until last year. And basically, we got all that done, and then we moved, and now we're moving to digitalization of some of those photographs, especially. We had books. We were talking about some of the stuff that we have in the inventory. We had books that had been books and artifacts and documents that had been on the shelf since the museum opened. Some of those, when you go back through them, some of those dated back to the 1830s, 1840s. And there were ledger books from stores, doctors' ledger books. We had doctors. We had, Mount Pleasant was unique, not unique, I don't think. We actually had 5 doctors living in this town at one time. So we have some of their books. None of that had ever been, it was just here. The books were just here. So one of the projects, part of that was scanning all of those documents and putting them so they will be available to scan. You can go through page by page. We had a huge genealogy section that was Mount Pleasant historian years ago created a ton of genealogy information, and we had those books, but just getting them into some kind of order where people can look at family information, so people who want to know their gender, stuff like that. Another thing too is because we are a college, well, we're a college, and because the information from the college, including the students, the teachers, and everything else that went on here, was housed. A lot of it is housed here. People who had grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents who went to school here. This was a boys' school, a men's school. And there was another school in town called a girls' school, but ours was a boys' school. We have information from both, but they will come and they will call, they will write, and they will want information about their ancestor, their ancestor who went to school here.
So I want to ask you a little bit about the workflow, because you all are kind of a tight-knit group of volunteers and you're very dedicated. And I know right now you're kind of reorganizing the photograph collection based on Erin Laramore's visit and the guidance she gave you with arrangement and description. And then you're also preparing the photographs to submit to digital NC. They were able to take the yearbooks because that's kind of an easy thing to prepare and get digitized for them. But now it's harder with the photographs and everything being different. So how are you sharing that work amongst yourselves?
Dick, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, sure. So, like Ben said, we're an all volunteer organization, so we're kind of have to work within that parameter of when the volunteers can come in at work and work. But we have a library committee, and the library committee's first function was to get all the books under control. So we went through the museum, found out what books we had, and we made a spreadsheet for those, and that project is done. And I think we put our hands on something like 500 or 600 books. I forget the end number. And the next project we were going to tackle was the photographs, and that we knew that would be an enormous task because we have filing cabinets full of photographs through the years that we have collected in the 50 years that the museum's been in business, been there. So, and really, we felt like the library committee felt like if we have all these resources and nobody knows where they are, we can't put our hands on them, they're pretty much useless. So we needed to find a way to make them available. And as you start to put your hands on things and pull files out and start looking through things, you realize really what you have. And so it's a very painstaking process. And I would tell people not to be afraid of it because it's the only way it's going to get done. But you just have to start in the first file and with the first picture. And we used the spreadsheet that Aaron had gave us, and that seemed to work really well. And we just pull a picture and we came up with a numbering system. So our goal is to inventory everyone. And I think we're in the filing cabinet for C's now. So after like maybe, I don't know, 4 months, we made our way through the first 2 or 3 letters of the alphabet. And so you really start to put your hands on things that you have, and you're like, wow, this is right here. Just like had been mentioned previously, you're like, wow, this is an amazing piece of history. So there's a companion to the picture on the screen. There's a companion shot of that that we located, and it's from a different angle, and so that's interesting. But you can almost tell it was pretty much taken the exact same day. So that's a pretty interesting view that it was not common for us to see. And so our goal was really to get our hands on all these, get them inventory. So if somebody came in and said, I need to see a picture of, great grandpa HTJ Ludwig, you'd be able to reach into the filing cabinet and find it, or be able to pull it up on a computer, or send them to the link in digital NC. So we started with the yearbooks because we knew that was the easiest thing. We really didn't have to do anything for the 4 annuals other than hand them to Aaron and say, have at it. So we didn't really have to inventory those. And we've already got back dozens of comments about how pleased people were to see those. And being on the Digital NC website exponentially gave more access to them than we would ever have in the museum. Being we're there, Saturdays the museum is open, but the library's closed, and then Monday we have office hours. So hardly anybody really would have came in to put their hands on them. So the annuals from 1925, 1928, 1932, and 1933 are up on the website. And if people are looking for pictures of MPCI students, Mount Pleasant Collegiate Institute students, we can direct them to that right now. So yeah, it's a painstaking process, but I would honestly say don't be afraid of it. It's the only way it's going to get done is to start with the first picture in the first folder and sit down and go through it. So we decided we're going to inventory every picture that we have, which I'm going to take a guess. It's got to be over 1,000 pictures that we have, maybe 1,500. Like I said, we're still in the season counting. So we've gone through, I think, 162 so far and got those inventoried. It takes a committee of people to sit around the table and do it because everybody has a little piece of what the picture is. Somebody might recognize the house the person standing in front of. Somebody might recognize the person. Somebody might recognize the street or the business. So you just have to take all of that and inventory it and get it on, get that information out. Because, you know, when you have an all volunteer organization or one employee, like we just heard from Matthew, they, those people leave, and with them, it leaves the knowledge of what this stuff is. So you are on a time clock to get some of this stuff done. Things like digitizing newspapers, that's important. But the things that people have in their head, I mean, that's, you have to get that down before those people leave. So yeah, it's, you know, you think of Mount Pleasant, you know, it's a one-stoplight town, but at one time it was a college town, and it was a huge college town with, you know, two different institutions. And we want to be a resource for, you know, for genealogy and for local history. And Ben didn't plug his book, which I will. Ben wrote an awesome book on the history of our institution. And so that's another great resource we have.
It was a 20-year project. It took me 20 years to begin.
Yeah.
Basically, and again, it started because of this museum and because of this institution here. I grew up in this town. I grew up across the street from where the museum is right now. And I became a volunteer. Actually, I lived in Chapel Hill for 30 years and then moved back here to retire. But I started writing that book. But the information that came from that book came from the, quote, unindexed resources that were here.
Yeah.
And using those things, and then of course doing research on the book. It's a 600-page book, which includes all the students, all the teachers, everything you want to know about this school, and things you didn't want to know about this school. But the point is that those resources were here. They started here at this museum. And again, this was something I started 20 years ago. I finally published it 2 years ago. But it's the history of the college. But I also wanted to mention a couple other things too about how the resources have been used here. Before I wrote the book, I also did, it's very interesting, again, talking about some of them. You were talking about the letters from Matthews that you came across. One of the things that I came across when I came back here and volunteered was a book of the town of Mount Pleasant town minutes. Now, Mount Pleasant was incorporated in 1859 as a town, the second incorporated town in Cabarrus County. In 1928, all the records of the town were burned in a fire. There was a fire downtown, and somehow the town records were in one of the stores that got burned. So we had no records. Even the town has no records of who the mayors were, different things going on. But when I started volunteering here, I came across a book that had been donated when the museum opened. And it was actually a book of the town minutes beginning in 1881 and ending in 1908. Somehow that book had survived. And you're talking about, and you mentioned, some people mentioned about things like that. So I basically, as a project myself, took that book, one small book, and I transcribed it. And from that, I annotated it and gave us, and went back and forth. And that's really, to me, was the first documented history of what you talk about Mount Pleasant. And of course, Mount Pleasant goes back further than that. But again, that came from this museum, and it was here, and it had not been inventoried, and people knew about it. Volunteers knew it was here. People who had worked here before knew about the book, but nobody had paid a lot of attention. It was just one of 100 on a bookshelf. That quote book, which I did write, is now online. I've created a website using that book as my basis, which I'm working on, because I can't find any more information and adding it to that book. But again, that was one thing that we talked about. Another thing that we've got going on now is we're taking some of the pictures of that we have here of old houses. We have many historic houses built in the 1850s. One built in 1840, early 1845, that still stand. And we're documenting those and photographing those as they exist now, comparing that with things. So all kinds of things like that, which again depend on the resources we have here. And eventually that will be digitized. Those pictures will be digitized, which is what we want, that people can just go online and pick them up and see them and get the information.
Lots of projects that you all have accomplished. It's amazing. And you have been very creative about promoting your collections.
Yeah,
And I want to say, I think, Ben, you mentioned this, but the town is looking to do another mural. And so I think the town, one of the city planners kind of spearheaded that project, relying on your collection, relying on the expertise that you all have developed about it and the photographs over time. So that's a great way to work together. And anyone who considering doing a similar project, we can connect you to the city planner who spearheaded that. They worked with a particular company out of Greenville to print vinyl strips to apply onto the building. So it's not a painting like you might think. And of course, worked with an artist to translate that black and white photograph into a color image to then print out in this large scale way. So it's a fascinating process and great project. I look forward to seeing the next one. It's very
We were
cool.
told that had about a 20-year lifespan.
Okay,
that
okay,
vinyl.
well, that's probably more
So
than a painted
It'll
mural,
be there
right?
for a while.
And one of the things Charles mentioned, and you mentioned this too, you talked about the town working with the murals, and Aaron Burris is the person you talked, the town planner, they have really decided finally to get involved in their history of the town, and now the mural is part of that. And Aaron is very interested in that. And one of the things that we do and try to do is provide them with information as they have a building they want to restore. Or we just, it was recently, not recently, there's a restaurant here in town called 73 in Maine that was actually on the site of a building. The original building was built in the 1830s, but it was over and over. It became a hosiery mill. Now it is a upscale restaurant here in town. But one of the things that they did, and we've also done this with several merchants and businesses in town, is when they open their businesses, they come and get photographs that we have, and they reproduce those photographs and have them put up, and they use them as displays and things like that. 73 Maine has many of those. We have several other restaurants here in town and businesses that use our pictures from our museum, and we work closely with those people. And again, when a new business opens up or business changes hands, not almost invariably they will come to the museum, come to society and say, we would like some information about this building, or we would like some pictures or something to use for our building. So we work very closely with merchants and things like that in town. We have a drugstore here that was actually still owned by the same family in the 1880s, and it still exists, and it's still owned by the same family. And so we work closely with those types of things, and it's just, it's different kinds of projects that we have ongoing, and promoting the town, but also letting people know that we're here, and doing tours. And I think somebody mentioned about doing tours. We have volunteers who do tours, and we continually update and upgrade our museum itself, just in terms of displays and things.
Yeah, the thing about having an all volunteer museum is you still have to run the museum.
Yeah.
So because we're closed January and February, that's when we update and clean and do things like that, paint, do things like that. But, you know, once the museum's back open, you still have to have people to run the museum. And then we'll get back to working on the photos. So.
Okay, and we've had a few questions about the spreadsheet that you all mentioned for working through that photograph collection. And thanks to Marcia, who works with you all, she's said that it came from Kristen Merriman at the Digital Heritage Center.
Right.
So I have a copy of that. It may be the exact one or similar one, and I'm sure Kristen's happy for me to share that out with anyone who wants.
Yeah, it's
it.
just a basic Excel spreadsheet, and you can adapt it to however you really want to. There's nothing really hard about it.
Yeah.
It's pretty simple.
Yeah. So any other questions for the panel as a whole? I know we're past an hour. I understand people have tightly packed schedules during the workday, and we certainly understand people who have to log off. But if there are other questions for anyone else on the panel or any of these three or as a whole, we'd be happy to spend a few more minutes together, share a little more time to have some more answers to that. So. If they're either in the chat or the Q&A is fine. But if there are no more answers, anyone else on the panel want to say any final thoughts? We really appreciate everybody's time today and getting together. I know it was kind of a challenge to find a day where everyone could meet, but this has been great. And I think you're all doing super work with just getting those stories out there and doing your best to make them as accessible as possible for a wider audience. So that's wonderful.
Just send it there. I'll put it everywhere.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you, Matthew, Barbara, Ben, Nick, Marcia, all of you, the whole group from Eastern Cabarrus. And we look forward to future collaborations and hope that more of the folks in our audience might be ready to get involved with TAP, Federation, Digital Heritage Center, and all the services that the state has to help cultural heritage institutions. I know everyone's trying to do so much with so little. And so however we can help you extend that reach of the few resources that you have, we are honored to be able to do that. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Adrian.
Thank you. Thank you. See ya.
Take care.
Bye.
I don't know why we didn't get online.
I